Okay, let's get started. Next step on our motor is going to be to install our piston, cylinder, and cylinder head. We have all of our parts here. We're running an 85-86 cylinder with an 85-86 68 millimeter piston. Have our cylinder head. Want to get this motor completed because we finally got our frame back from powder. Frame has been gusseted and powdered in prismatic powder illusion cinnamon. All ready for us to start assembling. And we have plenty of parts already to get assembled onto this to get this build going. So that is going to be our next step after we get this motor complete. But first step is to finish the motor up. So I have a 68 millimeter Wiseco piston here. Now on your piston, something you have to be conscious of when you're installing this is your ring gaps and the piston pins. And I have them marked with little black marks where those pins are. And if you may not be able to get in there with the camera, but you'll see when you look in there, I'm going to move it around a little bit, you'll see a little pin in there. And that's where that gap has to be when this gets put into the cylinder. And that will then hold that ring and keep that ring from spinning. Okay. First step before we do that is going to be to lube up our wrist pin bearing and get the piston installed. Now, as you can see on the top of the piston, there's an arrow. That arrow points toward the front of the motor. You also have two vent holes in the front there. Those also go toward the front of the motor. On our 85-86 pistons, there is a kind of moon-shaped cut in the skirt, whereas your later 87-89 pistons had kind of a window cut into the intake side of the piston. This has to do with the differences between the motors. 87, 88, 89 had a long rod motor. The 85s, 86 had a short rod motor. This is being built as a short rod motor. We do have a short connecting rod on here. If I was to build this as a long rod, I'd have to put a spacer plate in here, but I'm just building it as a short rod. So right now I'm going to go ahead, get this lubed up, and get ready to install our piston and get our, let's see, I think we have our wrist pin. There we go. Our wrist pin should be right inside of here. Just got to slide it out. There we go. Just got to slide that out, and then we'll be able to go ahead and get that installed. Okay, so I'm lubing up. I have some Royal Purple two-cycle oil here. Have some in the cap here using a Q-tip. Lubed up the wrist pin bearing. Set the piston into place. Got the wrist pin started. So we're going to push that in. It already has the circlip on the far side in place. So now what we'll do is get this wrist pin fully seated. Piston is facing in the correct direction, and then we're going to go ahead and install our circlip on this side of the piston. Okay, this is the circlip that you have to put in there. So you're going to have to work it into there and use like a pick to pry it up in and get it into place. They are very tight to work in there. It's one of the reasons why I have the rag in here, just in case it's to fly off. I do not want it falling down into where the crank is. Okay, got that successfully in. Definitely need to be careful when putting those in. Fortunately, I had two of them because the first one, I launched it across the garage floor. I heard it hit the concrete, but can't seem to find it. So I will find it eventually, but fortunately I did have a second one to go in. All right, I'm going to go ahead. The next step, we can remove this now that our circlips are in. Next step is going to be to prep our base gasket. I have a base gasket that I'm going to coat with a light coat of copper sealant. Then we're going to lay the base gasket in place. We got to put two alignment dowels on the left-hand side of the motor. Then before we put the cylinder on, we need to lube the outside of the piston. Make sure our gaps are about ready to line up on our pins, on our alignment pins. And then we have to also lube the inside of the cylinder, the walls as well. We'll do that wall with some 2-stroke oil. Then we can slide the cylinder right down over top of the piston. Okay, we've got our alignment dowels. Our piston is all lubed and our cylinder is all lubed. Going to go ahead and spray the gasket with a very light coat of copper sealant, and then we'll lay that in place and set the cylinder into place. Okay, we've got our gasket in place. Now, when I put this cylinder on, again, I'm going to line my rings up with the pins. Then I'm going to squeeze them, come down low, bring this up like this, squeeze it from the side, which is going to put my gaps right at the pins, and then I'll fit the cylinder down on top of it, and what'll happen is the cylinder, those two, I forget the name of them, the flanges that protrude down, will then slip over the rings and lock them into place, and then I'll be able to slide it down. So let me see if I can set the camera up so that you can see me installing it. Okay, so we're going to get this in place. We got our rings, our ring gaps lined up with the pins on the piston. So I'm going to come down low, make sure they are where they need to be. Okay, now I've got them in place. Now I'm going to take my cylinder. And there we go. There we go. And our cylinder is seated into place. So next step will be to go ahead and put our mounting bolts on and torque them into place. And then we'll be able to put our head gasket and head on the cylinder. Okay, so we got our base flange, our mounting nuts on. Now the torque spec for these is, according to the manual, is 27 to 34 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and set my torque wrench, and we're going to go ahead and torque those nuts. All right. Have all of our mounting nuts torqued to about 30.5 to 31 foot-pounds. So I just took my kicker, put it on the motor, because now we can actually make sure that everything is functioning. And this is why we lube the cylinder too, because then you can cycle it and you're not going to hurt it. And we can make sure everything is functioning correctly. Okay, so next step is going to be to put our head gasket. It's got to go correctly. The head gasket's going to go with the grooves all toward the front. Now, according to the manual, it says that you put it with the side that says up, facing up. This is a Honda OEM gasket, and it does not say up anywhere. So I'm going to install it. There's a stamp of some sort here. I'm going to put that side up. Both sides appear to be identical in, the way the metal is formed. So I'm going to spray a layer again of the copper sealant on there, and then we'll lay that in place, put the head on, and then torque it down. Okay, so head gasket's in place. We're going to go ahead and put the head on. Head's going to go with the head stay mount heading toward the rear. And now we will put on our crush washers and nuts, acorn nuts, and then get them torqued to spec. Okay, got our crush washers in place. Put a little anaerobic sealant, little dab on each stud just to seal the threads. Because again, this is a liquid cooled motor, so you don't want to potentially have any water leaking through the threads. They are known for it. A lot of your aftermarket heads for these motors, for the performance motors, they actually have machined O-ring holes beneath the washers for putting in O-rings to help seal them up good. The torque spec is 17 to 21 foot-pounds on these, so I'm going to torque them in a crisscross pattern, pulling the head down, because obviously you've got a multi-layer head gasket there. There's 3 different layers to it. We're going to pull that head down, get it torqued to spec. All right, so what I did was I gradually walked the head down with my torque wrench. Again, I have a digital torque wrench so I can see what it's going up to. I went up to 10. I did it in a crisscross pattern, 10 foot-pounds, 14 foot-pounds. Ended up at between 19.5 and 20 foot-pounds on all 6 head bolts. They're all fully torqued. So next step for this, or at least for what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go ahead and put my exhaust flange on. That'll bolt onto the front here. I have a spark plug that we'll put in, which will close that hole up and seal that cylinder. I'll put some tape over top of these water spouts for now, and some tape over top of the intake. I do have a reed valve here that came with my cylinder and piston, but I don't think I'm going to use that. I'd really like to get a set of V-Force 2 reeds. I really like those. Plus that one had a reed spacer, and I'm not sure if I'm going to go with a reed spacer or not. So I'm going to go ahead and get it set up to put the exhaust flange on. All right, so I'm using an aftermarket exhaust flange. This one's from BDT Motorsports. It's an O-ring. It's got 3 O-rings for the exhaust port and then 1 O-ring in the back for where it mates up to the cylinder. So I'm not going to have to use the factory gasket. This won't be used. This is what you would use with a stock exhaust flange, which is just a flat piece. This then bolts right up to the end of our cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and get that into place, get the bolts in place, and then that'll be it for today. Okay, we got our exhaust flange on with the O-ring. It seals, you feel it seat really nice into the groove right in the end of the exhaust port there. Seals up real good. I've just got some silicone on the ends of those O-rings that'll allow the expansion pipe to slide right over there, and then these holes here for the springs that help hold the expansion pipe in place. I've got everything blocked off right now and taped up. Intake, the vent, the water pipe. I put the hose on this end and put the clamps on it just to make sure everything stays sealed. Just got to tape this one up, and our motor is complete. At least for this point, until we get it in the frame. I don't want to assemble it any further until it's in the frame. So I hope this helps anyone out there doing the same project. If you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to leave them below. If you like what we're doing and look forward to seeing what we're going to be doing with our build, please like and subscribe. We will be moving on to the frame. Videos coming up will be us starting to actually assemble the bike and get everything together. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.